It's been crazy to see it come this far. If someone would have told us that Bitcoin is going to hit $10,000 someday, I think people would have been surprised in the early days. We look back and history seems so linear and so sure, right? But it wasn't that sure at the time. I mean, the bottom of the 2015 bear was pretty dismal. Bitcoin printed like $180 a Bitcoin. It had fallen from like $1,200 a Bitcoin. So that was like a pretty dismal moment. There wasn't content. I mean, there was almost no podcasters. There was barely any sort of industry news sites. There wasn't nearly there was basically no YouTube content. So it was really hard to feel like you were still believing in this trade. So to see it come all the way here where you got institutions going, oh yeah, Bitcoin is definitely gold 2.0, it feels weird. It feels like it doesn't feel real because we've been saying this for such a long time. And the fact that it's actually happening is kind of this weird moment of oh shit, I was right. Yeah, money is a belief system. Gold, dollars, Bitcoin, it's all the same thing. It's all a belief system. Now, Bitcoin has superior traits as a money, which gives it objectively good, it's objectively a better type of money. And we can, I don't want to get into those, but, Bitcoin has objectively better traits, but it doesn't matter if it has objectively better traits if no one believes that it does. And so that doesn't happen in a binary moment when people all wake up and go, oh, I see why Bitcoin's valuable. It happens in ebbs and flows. And I kind of think about it too from a marketing perspective. There's something in marketing called last touch attribution and multi-touch. So last touch is okay, you saw a Facebook ad, and that ad is the ad that we can attribute you becoming a customer of ours because you clicked on the button, I want to sign up, and came over. But in reality, what happened was you began your journey to become a Kraken customer far before that. You probably saw a Google search ad, and you probably saw a blog post of ours, and all these other touch points. That's multi-touch attribution. Your final convincing to become a customer happened over time. It wasn't this binary moment. And so with Bitcoin, it's probably the same thing, right? They heard about it in 2013, they didn't buy. They heard about it in 17 and they didn't buy. One of their friends or family members definitely bought it at some point and told them about it. And it's these multiple touch points where I think we do see this kind of spin into greater and greater adoption at a faster rate because of the multi-touch nature, because people have had repeat exposure. Whereas before, your first exposure, you're no, that seems like a scam, for sure. It seems like a Ponzi scheme, seems like a scam. But after the 50th exposure, you're why isn't this thing going away? I don't understand how it works, but it's not going away. And more people I know are buying it, and more institutions are buying it. And so that's where I think we do see hyper-Bitcoinization isn't a binary moment, but I do think it's an exponential growth moment where Bitcoin's entire existence has been exponential growth. But I think at the end here, the repeat exposure will have saturated people's consciousness so much to where there'll be very big catalyst moments where there might be a big level step up in Bitcoin adoption. And we usually see this happen in the bull runs, but maybe we see this happen at different catalyst moments of trust where people have lost trust in their government. I think COVID was an example of what that might look like, but there might be others in the future where there's a really big breach of trust by a government or a bank, and people go look at Bitcoin and they're you know what, I've heard about this thing for the last 10 years. This seems like a good solution. So I think that people's probability of converting to becoming a Bitcoiner grows increasingly over time because they can't ignore it. They can't ignore all their friends and family and all these different indicators maybe I should get into this. Volatility is so interesting to see how people react to it, where they would rather choose losing 2% a year, which is consistent, than take a bet where you have a very high probability of making many multiples over your initial principal. Just because the volatility scares people away. And that's where I think Bitcoin's kind of the perfect instrument of risk reward, where Bitcoin rewarded the early believers because you got in before others. And that's not a Ponzi scheme. That's not a scam. It means we had the guts to do it. And we were the ones who deserved it the most. Everyone else heard about it and they were too scared by it. So Bitcoin rewarded the risk takers, and those risk takers are the only ones who should be rewarded for that behavior. No one was granted this. No one was given this by the government. No one was handed. These Bitcoins weren't handed to them. You bought in because you believed, and the only ones who still have coins are the ones who stuck through it. So I think Bitcoin is
Dan, it's you always. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. It's you who always says hodling isn't easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually the hardest thing to do because you have to resist your emotions, right? You're resisting fear when it goes down, and you're resisting FOMO when it goes up. Because with the FOMO, you might go, "Oh, I could buy that car, I could buy that boat, I could buy that house." And it's not necessarily a bad thing if you do sell, but just don't do it in like a frivolous manner. Like, like if you go and you bought 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and you're like, cool, if it hits this price, I need to go buy a home. Me and my partner have talked about that. That's totally okay to do. I'm talking more of the emotional trading, right? Where someone puts it in 2 months ago and then they pop it right out. I mean, Bitcoin is the most phenomenal bet of the 21st century. And, just to take it for a short ride, it's such a long, crazy journey. You got to hop on that train for at least a couple of years. It's for me, it's been almost 9. And I wasn't a perfect hodler. I don't think anyone's a perfect hodler. And I think you've been pretty open with some of your experiences. But
yeah,
we all look at those transactions or those trades, and we're like, oh, why didn't I just hodl? So since 2013, I figured it out. I was like, okay, the only way to survive this thing is to hodl. But it's this really interesting journey of like self-discovery internally, of like recognizing these human emotions of fear and greed and trying to resist those. It's going down the rabbit hole and discovering things about energy and energy FUD and how energy FUD is tied with environmental concerns. And it goes really deep down these different, and then government and governance. So people who can govern me, why can they govern me, and why are they able to dictate other aspects of my life, like what I can do with my body? And so it's just the hodler's journey is kind of this like hero's journey. And I forget there's an author who wrote this, and I forget his name off the top of my head, but he had a really good piece on Bitcoin being the hero's journey, where you go through this sort of phased life of becoming a hodler. That goes through like pits of despair and realization and awakening. And the price is a huge component of that, right? I think everyone going through a bull bear run, like I give people, if you've gone through a bull and bear market, I think you're an OG. I think that gives you the title of OG because, it's a lot to go through, right? Think about March 2020 last year.
Dude.
Bitcoin went 3,400, right? That was either 34 or 38, I forget, but that was intense. I think everyone remembers that. It was like a 40% plunge in one day.
Yep.
Those moments, there's so many of those, because you had like Mt. Gox getting shut down, Silk Road getting shut down. You had like China banning Bitcoin 100 times. So it's been a long journey. And that's where, I think Bitcoin is the most fair distribution out there, because folks who risked it, held on to it, are the most deserving of it. For me, I knew it was risky. Did I think it might happen? Yes. Did I think it was very probable? I'd say I hoped it was probable, but I wasn't sitting there going like, this is for sure going to happen. I thought about it more of like, I want to help build this world to make that happen. And I think we've got a shot at doing it. And I'm going to hodl and see it all the way through. So that's kind of more of my thought behind it. Like, I knew that we had discovered something that most other people had written off. Bitcoin was this beautiful, beautiful creation that has all sorts of different aspects that are incredible in terms of like how it enforces decentralization makes it stronger, and the monetary policy breakthrough. And I realized I spent all this time going down the rabbit hole. Like I spent a long, long time, years. It took me years to get to these sort of levels. I wasn't talking as I talk about Bitcoin. I wasn't talking like this back in 2013. No one was. There was content built on top of content that enabled all of us to develop stronger convictions in Bitcoin.